7th of March, the year 2023, and members will be going into division on this bill. This bill on the natural resources benefit sharing that is originating from the Senate seeks to provide a legislative framework for the establishment and enforcement of a system of benefit sharing in natural resource exploitation between natural resource exploiters, the national government, county governments, and local communities, and to that end provides that the Commission for Revenue Allocation oversees the same. This is a bill that debate on the floor of the House took place, and this afternoon members will be going into division on this bill. Again, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill by Honorable Senator Moses Kajwang. Debate on this bill will be resuming also this afternoon, and the mover will be called to reply. This is the County Vocational Education and Training Bill originating from the Senate Bill number 3 of 2022. The principal object of this bill is to put in place a legal framework to govern the establishment and management of vocational education and training with the county, one of the functional areas of the county government as provided for under Part 2 of the fourth schedule to the Constitution relates to village polytechnics and homecraft centers. So the bill provides for preliminary matters and sets out various definitions, the guiding principle in relation to the implementation of vocational education and training, as well as the obligations of the registered under the Act. The part also provides for trainees with special needs and confers an obligation on the county governments to ensure that measures are put in place, including facilities and institutions to cater for the needs of trainees with special needs. That bill is on the second stage, and this afternoon the mover will be called to reply. Resumption on a bill on the preservation of human dignity and enforcement of economic and social rights bill, of course originating from the Senate, Bill number 7 of 2022 by Tana River Senator Honorable Danson Mungatana is also on the second stage, and debate on this bill will be resuming this afternoon. It is a resumption of a debate that was interrupted on Thursday, the 23rd of March, the year 2023. The motion by Nandi Senator Honorable Samson Cherargei on the doping menace threatening Kenya's impeccable global reputation in athletics is also lined up for consideration on the floor of the Senate chambers this afternoon. This motion by the honorable member seeks to have the Senate resolve that the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Arts come up with modalities that can help achieve increased testing, intelligence gathering on athletes, and doping awareness programs. Also, this motion seeks to have the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Arts, in collaboration with Athletics Kenya, that is AK, and National Olympic Committee of Kenya, that is NOC, to vet all training camps, coaches, trainers, and other athletes, handlers. This motion also seeks to have the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Arts initiate investigations at Anti-Doping Agency Kenya to identify and sanction all responsible officers liable for the menace of doping. Again, the ministry in collaboration with the Ministry of Health to identify and revoke licenses for medics, pharmacies, and hospitals responsible for the prescription of the commonly abused drugs by the athletes. Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Jeffa Kingi, is in the chambers. He will be presiding over this afternoon sitting. Allow me to hand you over for this live broadcast. Good afternoon.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor and blessings us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek your guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you've committed to our charge. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? Sergeant at Arms, kindly ring the quorum bell for 5 minutes.
Well, the Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Kingi, has just directed that the quorum bell be rung for 5 minutes. Of course, this is according to the House standing orders that at the commencement of the House, if the House does not have the requisite quorum for the commencement of business, then a quorum bell will be rung. This is to give way to members of the Senate to be able to walk into the chambers and participate into the business of the House for that particular sitting. The motion by Nandi, Senator Honorable Samson Cherargei, that is on the doping menace threatening Kenya's impeccable global reputation in athletics, is lined up for consideration. And its debate this afternoon will be a resumption of a similar debate that was interrupted on Tuesday of the 14th of March, the year 2023. The senators have a balance of 2 hours and 42 minutes to complete debate on this motion. The motion by nominated Senator Honorable Gloria Oroba on the provision of sanitary towels to end period poverty is also lined up for consideration by the members of the Senate this afternoon. And the mover of this bill seeks to have the Senate resolve a number of issues, including that the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Council of Governors, to facilitate provision of feminine hygiene products in all public schools, to also ensure that all schools that do not have bathrooms that facilitate privacy, cleanliness, or proper disposal of hygiene products are properly equipped. The ministry also should create awareness and take advocacy measures on reproductive health issues related to period poverty. Again, the Senate will be resolving that the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, of course, in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and the Council of Governors, to include in the curriculum a dedicated lesson per week to teach girls on menstrual hygiene.
Number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a delegation from the County Assembly of Turkana, comprising members of the Speaker's panel and its Secretariat. The delegation is undertaking a benchmarking visit in the Senate. I request each member of the delegation to stand when called out so that you may be acknowledged in the Senate tradition. Senators, kindly walk in. I will request each member of the delegation to stand when called out so that you may be acknowledged in the Senate tradition. The Honorable Philip Ekwam Lomria, the Deputy Speaker. The Honorable Michael Ewoy, First Member. The Honorable Mary Arupe Nakapwan, Second Member. The Honorable Samuel Aliwo, Third Member. Mr. Kahefas Ngasike, Director, Office of the Speaker. Mr. Patrick Tioko Engori, Director, Legislative Services. Ms. Roslyn Aite, Deputy Director, Legislative Services. Mr. Jacob Lokwe, Principal Clerk Assistant. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow, I don't see the Senator of Turkana in the House, so I will delegate that to the Leader of Majority to do the honors of welcoming the delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to welcome the visiting delegation from Turkana County. Turkana is a very, very important county in the matrix of devolution, Mr. Speaker. Sits at the very top, at the apex of our country's map. And on many occasions, Mr. Speaker, we've had opportunity to reflect on the success that has been devolution in this country. And Turkana is listed as among the proper testimonials of what devolution has brought to this country, Mr. Speaker. The picture that many have of Turkana before and after is quite impressive. Though there is great room for improvement, Mr. Speaker, the fact that the county assembly leadership is here and that together with the team that are charged with the responsibility of taking Turkana to the next level, Mr. Speaker, we do celebrate them and hail them for the work that they are doing. I do hope that in the course of their study here in Parliament, they'll get to interact. I'm told they were earlier with members of certain committees, Mr. Speaker, that they'll get to have a full learning occasion as well and enjoy to their fullest of satisfaction, Mr. Speaker. So I welcome this team and wish them well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Oburu, kindly have your seat. Honorable Senators, as you are aware, on Thursday, 23rd March 2023, the Senate passed a motion on the fifth report of the Procedure and Rules Committee and approved amendments to the standing orders, whose effect was to provide a framework for the processing of questions. The approval of the fifth report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the amendments of the Senate standing orders paves the way for Cabinet Secretaries to appear before the Senate to respond to questions. In approving the amendments to the standing orders, the Senate also resolved that the amendments shall take effect from Tuesday, 11th April 2003, and further vary the hours of meetings to provide for sittings on Wednesday morning. In this regard, I wish to guide the Senate on the procedure in which questions shall be considered. Honorable Senators, as it is standard practice, a senator who wishes to ask a question will be required to deliver a signed copy of the question to the clerk. The clerk shall process the question in line with Standing Order 51B and submit the notification to my office for approval. Upon approval, the clerk will be required to convey the questions to the relevant cabinet secretaries. The clerk will also submit a list of questions to be asked to the Senate Business Committee. We shall schedule a date and time for appearance of the relevant cabinet secretary before the Senate to respond to the question. Let me read that again. The clerk will also submit a list of questions to be asked to the Senate Business Committee. We shall schedule a date and time for appearance of the relevant cabinet secretary before the Senate to respond to the question. The clerk will be required to give a cabinet secretary at least 7 days' notice before the date appointed for the cabinet secretary to appear before the Senate. Upon approval of the schedule by the Senate Business Committee, the clerk will be required to publish on the parliamentary website and circulate to the senators a schedule of all questions not later than Friday preceding the day upon which the question is to be responded to by the relevant cabinet secretary. A cabinet secretary will in turn be required to provide a physical and electronic copy of a response to a question at least 24 hours before appearing before the Senate. Honorable Senators, questions shall be dispensed with in the manner approved by the Senate Business Committee and as scheduled in the order paper. A senator shall only ask his or her question on the day it is scheduled in the order paper, and senators will be required to address questions to cabinet secretaries pursuant to Standing Order 51C1 in the manner approved by the Speaker. It shall be out of order to introduce a new question on the floor of the Senate. Similarly, questions that are not listed in the order paper and therefore not approved by the Speaker and accordingly not scheduled by the Senate Business Committee will not be permitted on the floor of the Senate, and their introduction will be out of order. Pursuant to Standing Order 51C2, a senator may in writing nominate another senator to ask a question on his or her behalf where the senator shall be absent on the day on which the question is listed. Senators, kindly, okay. However, a question will be dropped in the event of the absence of a senator without written notice to the Speaker. The Speaker may allow withdrawal of a question by a senator for reasons stated. After a cabinet secretary has responded to a question, the standing orders give the Speaker power to allow the senator who asked the question to raise a maximum of 2 supplementary questions that relate to the original question. Any other senator shall be allowed to ask 1 supplementary question. Honorable Senators, concerning access to the chamber by cabinet secretaries and appreciating the limited seating capacity of the chamber, I have designated the place adjacent to the chair on the right as the appropriate place where cabinet secretaries will make their responses to questions. This is the usual place where administration of oath ordinarily takes place. The cabinet secretary may be accompanied by a maximum of 3 officers from the ministry who will take seats to the right of the chair reserved for public officers. The question framework obviously demands that the management of time of the Senate is done prudently. In this respect, I direct that each question scheduled shall not take more than 20 minutes. This should account for the original question and the supplementary questions. Cabinet secretaries will be required to be sanctioned in making their responses to questions, but may submit to the clerk documents in support of oral responses, which will be deemed to have been tabled upon receipt by the clerk. Pursuant to Standing Order 51C6C, cabinet secretaries may make statements or provide reports to the Senate on other matters pertaining to the respective dockets with the leave of the Speaker. In this respect, and appreciating the limitation of time, a Cabinet Secretary may address the Senate on only one matter for not more than 20 minutes. Whenever a Cabinet Secretary addresses the Senate, the Cabinet Secretary shall be heard in silence. Interventions and points of order will not be entertained when the Cabinet Secretary is making his or her submission. Senators may react to the submission by Cabinet Secretaries through supplementary questions. I therefore implore upon honorable senators to acquaint themselves with the Standing Order 98. Unnecessary interruption of a Cabinet Secretary in the course of his or her submission to the Senate will not be entertained. Honorable senators, in light of the new standing orders, there have been concerns as to the power of committees to cause the attendance of Cabinet Secretaries to answer matters for which a Cabinet Secretary is responsible. Concern has been expressed that the new standing orders have taken away the requirement for Cabinet Secretaries to appear before select committees. The standing orders as a whole are facilitative and procedural in their nature, and they are not the basis for which a substantive right, privilege, or requirement is conferred or otherwise taken away. These are the domain of the Constitution and statute law, and not the standing orders. It must be made clear that the amendments to the standing orders to provide for Cabinet Secretaries to respond to questions in the House does not override or overturn the requirements of Article 153(3) and 4B of the Constitution. Cabinet Secretaries will still have the obligation to adhere to this article when required by committees of the Senate. Further, Article 125 of the Constitution has similarly not been overturned by the new standing orders. In any event, honorable senators, no statute, regulation, or subsidiary regulation for that matter can override the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any other law that is in contradiction of the Constitution, then to the extent of that contradiction, that law is null and void. And therefore, we place the Constitution as the supreme and mother law. Therefore, the House or any of its committees may invoke its provisions in the discharge of the mandate of the Senate. Honorable senators, given that this is a new process, I appeal for utmost cooperation from senators. I urge senators to familiarize themselves with the new procedure ahead of its application upon resumption of sittings after the short recess pursuant to the calendar. It is my sincere hope that the question tool, aside from statements, petitions, and motion and bills, will enhance our oversight mandate and the executive accountability to Parliament, by extension to the people of this Republic. The House is guided accordingly. I thank you, honorable speakers. Next order.
Order number 3, messages.
Senator Boni Kalwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the communication you just made is historical in the sense that you've now made a pronouncement on what will form going forward the most important oversight tool in this Senate, especially...
Senator Boni, just have your seat. I'll come back to you.
Have I?
I have stated on numerous occasions that there is a place for points of order in these standing orders. Kindly look at Standing Order 98 of our standing orders. It is the only standing order that talks about points of order, and it explains when a senator can actually rise on a point of order. If your point of order is not within the provisions of Standing Order 98, then I'm afraid I may not allow you to proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'm well informed of what you're saying. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you. All I wanted to do, Mr. Speaker, is to request that you shed clarity on a matter which I think is very critical, because, Mr. Speaker, most of the questions from the Senate, unlike in the National Assembly, will lean towards issues devolution. And in the structure of the current government, there is no cabinet secretary for devolution. However, there is a principal secretary in the office of the deputy president responsible for issues of devolution. So I wanted you to clarify, Mr. Speaker, sir, whether it will be clear that the deputy president will be responding to questions that lean towards devolution, and what's more, you clarify whether chief administrative secretaries will have a role, lest they end up being sent here when we do not expect them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni Kalwale, one, that is not a point of order. Secondly, I think when these matters debated, the amendments were debated and passed on the floor of the House, you were not here. I kindly implore upon you to take time to read the amendments. All the concerns you have, the answers are contained therein. Next order, clerk.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.